Happy Friday. Welcome to another zrok Office Hours. Today, if you're new here, I just sort of wing these videos. I kind of like to just talk about whatever I'm currently working on in the world of zrok and maybe show you some things that are interesting and maybe let you watch me do some off-the-cuff coding and watch me fumble around with stupid bugs and things like that. And it's hopefully a good time for everybody. I know it's a good time for me because I like Friday, and I always seem to do these videos on Fridays. So maybe I should rename this like zrok Fridays, something like that. Office hours. I'm not sure that office hours is the right name for this series of videos. Maybe we'll change it at some point. But if you're new here, zrok is a sharing platform that lets you share network and file resources similar to some other tools that are out there. Some of them even have similar names. And it's all open source, runs on top of OpenZD, has strong security built in. OpenZD lets us do really innovative and clever things with network programming, truly makes things peer-to-peer and in a secure way and all kinds of clever stuff like that. But I'm in the middle of working on the 1.0 release, which is the next major release of zrok. The current version in production is 0.4. It's 0.4.41, I think, currently. And I'm adding some interesting new features to zrok. And one of them is the zrok agent. And if you are new here, you might want to go back and watch some of the older videos before you get to this one. The last video, I kind of talked about what the agent was and how it works and what it offers. And today, the web UI for the agent is basically starting to come together a little bit. I've kind of got a minimum viable version of that web UI put together. And I think today I'm gonna show it off a little bit, and then I'm probably gonna go ahead and do a little coding on it, add some more features, and we'll kind of figure out what makes sense to do when we get there. So let's take a look at some of this stuff. So I'm in the middle of cleaning up my environment, making sure I'm on the current version of everything. I kind of like to periodically just delete my entire Go path and make sure that everything's nice and clean and tidy. I think that's just an old thing that I used to do back in the days of C++ development. I don't think I've ever really run into a problem where the contents of my Go path was problematic in some way. The Go tooling's pretty good about keeping that stuff solid, but it's just an old habit that dies hard apparently. So this is my traditional zrok development environment, and I usually run the zrok controller over here. I run the zrok controller metrics bridge, which pulls the metrics data out of OpenZD and injects it into the zrok controller here. And then I run my public front end, which is, if you've used zrok before, when you do a public share and you get one of those whatever share token.share.zrok.io URLs, it's running the public front end. So I run one of those locally in my development environment. And I've got some wildcard DNS set up locally that lets me mimic the same thing sort of on localhost. And I use that for development. And then with the new agent, one of the things that's new to the whole equation is now that we've got this agent, which is a process that rather than running individual zrok share or zrok access commands, it kind of manages all of that for you. So you just sort of enable your environment, run the agent, and then you can interact with it through the CLI and let it manage multiple processes for you. And that's what I demonstrated in the previous video. Or now you can actually interact with it through a web interface that's coming together. And I think that's gonna make things a lot easier for certain segments of the user base to deal with. I think there's some folks that have had to necessarily use the CLI when they didn't really want to. And I think what we're cooking up is gonna make it so that people that don't want to use the CLI and just want a nice web interface will have that, and it won't change the equation in the least for the people who want the traditional CLI experience and want that power. I think we're going to be able to satisfy all of that stuff. So that being said, the zrok is built so that kind of everything ships inside of the zrok binary, including the zrok controller and all of the components that you would need to stand up for a production deployment, other than the OpenZD bits, are all bundled into the zrok binary. So the web UIs, all that sort of stuff. And I say UIs now because there's now two of them. There's the, if we look in the UI folder, that's the web console itself. So when you go to api.zrok.io and you log in there, that's the web console. And that's an old create React application. And that's been due for a refresh and revamp for a while. And that's probably the next big thing that I'm going to be working on after I kind of get the agent UI pulled together. And so that uses create React app. The new agent UI, which is I've kind of let live down here, is a Vite app. So I'm now using Vite with the React, with plain old React. And that's, I'm kind of tickled with that. That's a much better way of working, much more modern. So I'm one of those developers who I kind of swap in JavaScript and front end stuff as I need to. I enjoy it. I'm not scared of it. I love usability. I love working on UX, and I'll next week I'm planning on spending some time polishing up this new sort of updated look and feel for zrok. And what you'll see today is just sort of a placeholder. I haven't really put much work into making this look appropriate yet. I'm just kind of trying to rough in the functionality still. So that's coming next week. So make a long story short, I'm not constantly developing, JavaScript, TypeScript stuff. So I kind of have to swap things in as I need to. So if you see me doing something stupid with React or JavaScript, just bear with me. Feel free to comment if you got any advice or suggestions. I'll love to hear what you say, what you have to say about it. So anyways, let's go ahead and get started. So I'm going to go ahead and I've been, for the agent work I'm doing, I typically in this window, and I've got my environment is enabled with my local development environment. So I've kind of got a zrok environment already enabled. And the zrok agent used to a zrok agent start, and now I'm running the zrok agent. And if you look in .zrok, which is where when you do a zrok enable, it puts all of the contents of that enabled environment in your home directory .zrok folder. Now there's an agent socket, which is how the CLI communicates with it, and how the new REST API talks to it, all that sort of stuff. So, and I'm using something which I found, which is clever. So if I open up Firefox and I go look up gRPC gateway, so the way that the CLI talks to the agent is through gRPC, so it's protobuf stuff, which we use elsewhere in the ZD stack. So it's not new to ZD in general. We do use a lot of protobuf stuff. So I pulled that in, which is, if you've used Docker before, the Docker CLI and the Docker backend, I believe they communicate over a local Unix domain socket using gRPC also. It's a pretty typical way of doing things. But I found this really clever piece of infrastructure that lets you basically add some plugins to your protobufs, your gRPC definition, and then it provides a gateway that runs in the same process and lets you expose a REST API basically, which is really handy because you can maintain just the protobufs definition, which for the new agent is over here. This is the protobufs definition, and I've already gone ahead and started augmenting this with the gRPC gateway stuff. So it's a work in progress. So using that, and so that's running. So what that lets you do is do things like zrok agent status. So you can see that I've got nothing in my agent. I can do a zrok share public, backend mode web, and it will go ahead and create a share in my agent. So if I do a agent status, you'll see that it shows up there. Zrok agent release share. And then now that agent is empty again. So what's really cool though is there's a new command, and I don't want to demo yet. I mean, we'll have to rebuild it. We need to rebuild the work in progress UI to show this off. But there's a new agent console command. If you do zrok agent console, it will basically open a web browser with the correct URL for your agent for your environment. So you never have to keep track of, like, if you're running multiple agents, which agent is attached to which environment and which port it is. It just takes care of all that for you. So if you're used to using like a $, a home equals with zrok, and you set it to a different home directory, you could do home equals whatever zrok agent console, and it will automatically pop up your console with the correct URL for that environment. So you never have to keep track of any of that, which is kind of handy. But I'm going to go ahead and run Vite dev, right? And then I can come over here to my, this is the fledgling UI. It's very basic. I haven't styled anything. It's really simple. Using material UI stuff. It's React. And basically this is just a title bar, but this was the first API call, kind of pulling back the version information. And there's some new functionality in here now. These buttons aren't hooked up yet, but when it's empty, it shows this little piece of advice. You can add a share, and it pops up a new modal for you. I want to create a public web share, and these drop downs, this isn't fully populated yet. I put enough in there just to play with it. And then we can say target equals home, Michael, repos, NF zrok, right? And then if I hit create share, now I've got a share in my environment. And I'm still playing with the idioms for the UI. I think it's going to end up being sort of like and I'm kind of playing with this because I'm thinking about how I want the new web console to work also. And I kind of want it to be sort of a search box where you can kind of look what you're looking, and it shows, find what you're looking for in terms of filtering. And maybe it shows a list of all of the things in sort of the order they were created by default. And I don't know, a little bit more freeform, a little bit more document oriented. I'm not sure. I originally sort of mocked this up with like a, data table with the shares and accesses and that sort of stuff. And I don't know, I kind of want to play with this and see what makes sense and try and play with some new idioms here. But you can go ahead and, delete works currently. We'll just add another one again. All right, so add a share, and then it's got the URL link, so you can go right to the share. And again, this is running in my local development environment. So yeah, so that's basically what we're doing. And I think the nice thing about this is that, when I first did this, it's completely weird to me. Feels strange, but the idea is when you, if you're a non-CLI zrok user, you'll be able to do, we'll end up being able to provide some sort of installer at some point that basically you run the installer. Maybe there's a simple tool or the zrok agent itself will let you enable an environment. And then from there, you don't ever have to touch the CLI and you can create shares. That's sort of the first 1.0 series vision. And then following pretty quickly after that with 1.1, the idea is going to be that there'll be a new command, something like zrok agent enroll. So you'll be able to go into the web console and say, I want to add remote control of my agent to the web console, the central administration. And the web console is when you go to api.zrok.io, that's the web console. It lets you see all your environments, all your shares, all those kinds of things. The goal for 1.1 will be to let you enroll a remote agent and let the centralized web console manage your remote agent, which means you won't have to have access through, you'll be able to go straight to the API and manage remote zrok agents, which means you can create and destroy services as you need, all that kind of stuff. So that's coming. And we can do that in a very secure way through ZD itself. So basically, there'll be things that involve ZD identities. So the control infrastructure will have a ZD identity, and the zrok controller will create the policies that let that centralized controller speak to your remote agent over ZD. So all of that stuff will be secured in exactly the same way as the rest of zrok. So nothing exposed to the internet, nothing weird like that, just all transparently works through ZD. It should end up being pretty slick, I think. So, but we got to take it a step at a time and get there. So this is the new agent under development. I think what I want to do today in this video is probably go ahead and maybe do the work to add the access, the parallel access stuff. So let's do that. So the first thing that I'm going to want to do right now, this is the protobuf definition for the gRPC for the agent. And right now there's these two RPC methods that don't have any mapping for the gRPC gateway. So let's go ahead and do that. So add option, Google API, HTTP equals, and this will be access private will be a post, and we'll set it at v1 agent access private, right? Why doesn't it like my, is it that? What did I do? So if you're new here, I spend some of my time going, what is going on with this? And hopefully you enjoy that kind of thing, but, oh, because I spelled Google wrong. Goog. All right, so Google. Yeah, and then option Google API HTTP equals, This is a release request. So we're going to say v1 agent release access. So these two RPC methods, this one is an RPC call to the agent saying I want to create an access, and an access is basically a way to say there's this share in zrok, whether it's private or public, and I want to bind it to a local IP address. So I want it to be on localhost, or I want it to be on my LAN, something like that. I want to take this zrok share and I want to attach it to the network somehow. That's what access is. So we can create and release these things. So these are the two calls, and it basically takes a access private request and a release access request. And an access private request is here. So it takes a token and the address you want to bind it to, and the you can override headers for HTTP shares, and that's there. You can add headers, and that's the headers that you want to add. In the release access request, yeah, and the access private response returns a front end token. So there's when you create an access, you'll see that it has if I can just do it. If I come in here and I make a new window, let's just do this. If I make not a new session, I wanted a new window. Oh, stop doing that. I want that one. Yeah, I can close them here, right? Yeah, just get rid of those. Don't need those. All right, so what I meant to do is new window. So now if I come down here and I do a zrok access private, and I've got a reserved share name testing, or yeah, the shares, yeah, it's a reserved share name testing. So if I do that, export path local zrok bin, and I set my go path to a specific directory for every project I'm working in, and I stick them all in tilde local. That way I can just, it works great for projects under development. So if I do a zrok access private testing and we go back to our web console, you can see that now there's an access here, and it's got the different icons, the access icon. And there's no controls for that, like you can't delete it or anything yet, and there's no way to create one through the web console. So that's what we're about to do. So let's do a zrok agent status, zrok agent release access, and we'll get rid of that, right? Bam, there we go. All right, so now that we updated this protobuf stuff, what we have to do is come over here, and let's get rid of this for the time being. And there's a script, generate PB, which generates all the components necessary to implement the protobuf stuff. And that part of that gRPC gateway is it actually generates an open API spec, which is very, very helpful, because I didn't want to have to maintain a sort of parallel open API spec for the web portion of the agent. So, but now we have to do a generate REST, which is this generate script generates the protobuf stuff, including that the open API script. This script takes all the open API specs and generates all the clients for them. So we'll go ahead and do that. And if we do a get status afterwards, you can see that it updated all of the agent gRPC components and the JavaScript portions of the agent UI. So that's what we're looking for. So now we've got our agent REST stuff implemented. We should be able to go into the agent UI, and this is the Vite managed React project. And even the structure of this React project is very much under development. Like I'm going to be moving this stuff around and figuring out how I want this stuff to work longer term. Like I'm just using central CSS, and because I'm using Material UI, I'm kind of using style overrides and things like that in Material UI stack itself. But I'm going to have to address all of that before I can, next week when I want to polish up what this looks like. So what I ended up doing is there's sort of and I probably could switch to Redux or something like that and manage my state, but I'm basically, what this UI really does is there's a use effect that just does an interval, and once a second hits the agent and asks for status, which returns shares and accesses, and it builds an overview out of it, which puts it in a map and structures it the way I want it structured for the UI. It does that once a second, and that gets pushed into the rest of the UI components through normal React properties and things. And there's also a use effect that for the first time when the app loads, it basically asks the agent for its version. So we're going to need to sort of make a new modal for the, and it might end up being that I really want to use one modal for this, but for right now, I'm going to go ahead and make a parallel modal. So say new access, and this is a Boolean that controls whether or not the modal is open. All right. And like I said, there's probably a better way to do this, but for now, we're just going to kind of do this. And let's const open new access equals set new access true, const close new access, set new access false. And then we're going to borrow this for now. And let's just call this, let's move it down here rather than making a whole new one because it's going to be the same. We'll say modal, actually let's rename it to modal style for now. And that should be everything we need to make that parallel modal. There's some React Router DOM stuff in here. Some of this is a little bit vestigial, like it's just, I'm figuring out as I go along how I want this to work. This is the callback that actually gets invoked when we want to create the share. So let's go ahead and do const access handler. It takes the values from the form. And it's only ever going to create a private one. So we'll say API agent access private, and it takes, what does it take? Let's go look. So the easiest way to figure out what it takes is to look at the protobuf def. And it takes access private request takes a token and a bind address. And that's all we're going to wire in for right now is the token and the bind address. So we'll say token equals values.token, bind address, values.bind address, right? And then yeah, API, and then it wants the, yeah. So basically this error handling is total garbage. I will improve this before I do anything with this for real. But we're basically going to do close new access. Whether it succeeded or failed for right now, it doesn't matter. We're just going to close it. So that way, when once the API call has been made, it just closes the modal dialog basically. And we're going to call this share. Call it new share form. All right. And then we're going to say const new access form equals use formic. Initial values, we're going to say token is empty and bind address empty. And then on submit is access handler. All right. Okay. That should be the basics that we need. Okay, we don't need that anymore. So this agent UI, which is the root, basically has a router provider, which is part of the React Router DOM that returns a component based on the path. And then I'm defining a modal here, which is the new share modal. And then I'm going to define another modal that is basically the new access modal. And I think realistically, it might make, this needs to be broken out into a separate component file and like actually modularized in a better way. And I'll definitely refactor all of that soon. But for right now, I just kind of want to get this working. So I kind of have a complete version and you can kind of see what was involved in making that happen. So just bear with me. So let's just basically, we care about this stuff. So we're going to And then we're going to close that, and we're going to call this open new access on close new access. And then we're going to basically borrow this stuff. Box. And we're going to say access. So let's just leave it like that for the moment. And then let's get it wired up so that it actually opens correctly. And we'll add access click, open new access. So I'm providing the function to change that state as a property to the overview component. That way it can be wired into the nav bar, and it can be wired into I'll show you what I'm talking about, this thing. So if we get rid of the share, this guy, so this right now, if you click it, doesn't do anything. This one does. So we need to wire that up. So that is in the overview component. So if we open up overview, all this is doing is basically managing an array of cards. So I've got an access card and a share card, and that's basically all it does. So we'll say release, need to wire in release access equals props.release access. And then we're going to add another, we need to add this here, on click equals props.access click. I can type it. That should be enough to, to make that work. So if you're familiar with React, I'm probably abusing properties a little bit, and I'll refactor and clean some of that up as I work through my ideas for this UI. But basically that gets us a modal here and gets us a modal here. So now we've got our modal, and we need to also wire it into the nav bar, I believe, to make, that is functional. This is not functional. So we need to go into the nav bar, which is down here, and we need to say access click equals open new access, right? And if we go into the nav bar itself, we're going to say for this button, on click equals props.access click. So now if we click this, that works also. So I think we've got all the actions sort of wired up. Let's go ahead and start filling in that modal now. Okay, so we need a form. And this is going to be, this is new access form handle submit. And I literally just started looking at this Formic library. This is an example of me swapping in knowledge as I need to with JavaScript stuff. I was looking at the material UI things and kind of looking at the latest way of doing forms and such. And the conventional wisdom that I sort of ran into was use Formic to sort of manage your form state. There might be better ways of doing this. I don't know. I would expect these forms will be fairly small. They may have a little bit of conditionality to them. Like if you pick private here, this list will change because the backend modes that are available for private share are different than what's available for public share. So I'm gonna have to figure out how to manage some of that conditionality. I'll figure it out. So now we need a text field. And this is going to be, these are both just regular old text fields. So I think we don't even need this. I think we can just do that. Let's see, does that still work? Yeah, okay, so we can just do that. So we'll borrow this. We're gonna come down here. And this is, and the properties for in this form are, I think it was the token and the backend. Yeah, token and bind address, right? So we're going to add a token label share token. I try to standardize in all of the zrok code. Anytime that you see the word token that appears by itself, it's almost always universally referring to a share token. Any other type of token, I prefix it with the type of token. So like when you create an access, it returns a front end token, because when you create an access, you're actually inside zrok creating a front end. So it returns a front end token. So if you see token by itself, so I really probably could just leave that as token, but I kind of want to be extra specific in the UI, so I'm going to leave it there. Value is token. Okay, so then we need another one of these for our bind address, and I'm not going to worry about the headers for now. I'll make sure that the agent UI has all of the same capabilities as the CLI. But I don't want to deal with it for the sake of this zrok Friday video. So this is the bind address. Bind address. Bind address. Bind address. And then we're going to need a button. A submit button. I don't think that needs to be two separate lines. I don't know. Some developers love to have things vertically long. I tend to prefer to have longer lines rather than having too much vertical space. And for me, it's fairly context sensitive. It depends on what I'm doing. And I think overall, my brain wants to make the code as readable as it can in the way that makes sense to my brain. And I know different people sort of have different sensitivities to what makes sense there and what doesn't. But that's just kind of how my brain works. So we're going to borrow this button, and we're going to say create access. So that we'll say testing, that's a reserved share that exists, and we'll say bind address is 127.0.0.1, and we'll say 88.89, right? Create access. Oh, did I not implement a handler to do that? Or did something blow up? Changing an uncontrolled to be controlled. Too many. Let's just clear this out and reload and try it again. Share token is testing. Oh, I wonder if something's. Oh, it's still new share form. Huh. Yeah, that's the dangers of copy and paste. All right, let's reload this and try again. Testing 27.0.0.1. And that post returned at 404. Oh, you know why? Because I need to rebuild when we rebuilt the protobuf stuff, I didn't rebuild and restart my agent. So that doesn't actually know about that URL currently. I did the exact same thing. Like I literally did the exact same thing when I built the new share functionality yesterday. So that's how I knew what it was so quickly. Is I literally did the same thing yesterday. So now we should just reload it again just to be sure. New access, testing, 127.0.0.1, 88.89. And there we go. Each channel should have a unique key. I'm gonna get rid of that error. We still need to put the delete button on there. We'll do that in a second. If we go into the overview, we'll say, I think I can just add a key here. I can say row.v.frontend token. And I think that will fix it. Yeah. And the cool thing is, like, if I go into the CLI right now and I do a zrok agent status, it's the same status. So you can see my front end here. It's the same 6B0 whatever. 6B0. So that's all wired up. So let's go ahead and wire in the release button. So that's there also. So that's going to be in the access card. Let's pull up the share card and look at what we did. And it's just this guy. delete icon is not defined, so let's just pull that. Oops, let's just pull that in. Yes. Release click is not defined. That's going to be an overview. Oh, this is one of my little, I don't necessarily understand exactly why this, I intuitively do. I don't think I could explain it. Release clicked equals, and then we'll say props.release access token props.access.frontend token. And then we're going to basically ignore this, and we'll say console.log. We don't need to worry about it. Yeah, let's do console log, and we'll log the release clicked, just like we did a minute ago. All right, so that, now we've got a delete button that should work, but doesn't. What did we do wrong now? It's not a function. Okay, so it's not yet. Now it's not wired in. So if we go to overview, release access, so that's not wired into overview, I'm assuming. So overview, yes. So we need release. Let's make this a little tidier. Release access. All right. We need to implement that still. So we'll say const release access equals ops API.agent release access ops console log data. And now we can just make this a little tidier. Okay, so now that should work. Reference error. Oh, did I spell API wrong? I did. It's not an APIT, it's an API. Internal server error. I bet I'm not passing the right data or something. So we'll say console log ops. Token. It's not token, it's front end token. So if I go to access card, yes, it should be front end token. There we go. All right. So that should be all working now. So that lets us do, now that we've got both shares and accesses working, we can set up a private web share, and we'll set it to this path. And that's not bound to anything now, so that's just a private share. And then we can come in here and we could create a new access, and we can say it's this, and we'll say our bind address is 127.00.1, and we'll set it to 9991. All right, and then we should be able to go to 27.00.1 9991, and it works. So there we go. So yeah, so that's kind of what I wanted to implement in this zrok Friday video. So let's go ahead, as I always like to do before we commit this stuff. Let's close all this. Let's close that, and then we're going to go in and do a look at our changes and make sure we understand exactly what we did. So really, in this agent gRPC folder, these two files are generated, and so is that. So really, the only thing I changed was the protobufs definition. So there is that, and that's what I expect. I just basically added the gRPC gateway thing to it. I still need to implement share reserved, and that's again, I need to figure out how to not going to make a separate dialog for that. Like I need to figure out how to make all these conditionally sort of exist in the same dialog. So that's what I expected in there. If we look in the docs, this is all generated. Yeah, this is generated code. This is generated code. This is generated code. So that all that API stuff is generated. That's the client API for the agent UI that was generated off of this open API def. We changed, we'll start from the top, we changed agent UI, which is the root of the application, to add the new parallel items for adding the separate modal for creating a new access. That's all there now. Yeah, we renamed some stuff, so that's no longer formic, now it's new share form. We renamed a bunch of things. We made the new access form, access handler. So we made parallel versions of those things, and then we added a new, we added this new modal, basically. So that's what we did to the root. And then from there, we went to the overview, and we basically adjusted the properties that we're pushing into these things. We wired in a new on-click for the access handler, the new access form stuff for that modal, which is all stuff that I would expect. And then in the nav bar, we wired in the button that's up there for creating a new, so we got the share click and the access click. These are backwards. Let's fix that. So this should actually be the other way around. An access is the LAN icon, and a share is the share icon. So we go back and look at the UI. That's a share. That's an access. Okay, so those were wired up backwards. That's fixed. And then in access card, we added the new bits to allow the release button to work, basically. So that's kind of what I wanted to give a quick tour of and work through a little bit. So I think I might rename this from Zrok Office Hours to Zrok Fridays. The only problem that I can see with that is there's been a couple of times that I've done these videos where it wasn't on a Friday. And maybe that's okay. Maybe we'll just let that be an exception to the rule, and we'll talk about it when it's on a Monday. We'll say it's Zrok Fridays on a Monday. I don't know. I'll give it some thought. But yeah, so that's kind of what I'm deep in the work on 1.0. I'm expecting a lot of interesting progress over the next handful of weeks. I'm kind of hoping to have 1.0 out before the end of the year still. I'm actively sort of trimming the backlog and grooming it to narrow down to just the things I think I can get done in that time period, so we can get a good solid release out that's compelling and has a bunch of interesting stuff in it. And so far I feel like it's on track. So yeah, hope you enjoyed this video, and definitely appreciate your time and attention, and hope to see you in the next one. Thank you so much. Happy Friday. Have a good weekend. Bye.